Nice one. Nice one altogether. We're getting there. Still have some homework to do.
Oh, come on. Oh.
What the hell?
Sometimes, sport isn't just numbers, trophies, and tables.
Yes, mate. Well done.
Sometimes sport is a mirror. In it, you don't only see who you are today, you catch a glimpse of who you could be tomorrow. In the early 2000s, one figure sliced Formula One cleanly down the middle. Sebastian Vettel, phenomenally quick.
Sebastian Vettel, the 19-year-old making his debut. He's 7th on the grid. Great effort from him.
Relentlessly effective and endlessly controversial. He was booed on podiums, called arrogant, accused of being the villain in the fans' little red book.
That's a podium, man. That's a wrap.
And yet, by the end of that very decade, the same man was stepping away as one of the paddock's most respected drivers.
Grazie ragazzi, grazie.
Softer, more human, openly self-critical.
As I said, the maneuver before was not necessary, and obviously
A hand on the shoulders of younger teammates, the armor gone from his eyes and replaced by understanding. How do you make a turn like that under the brightest lights? How do you go from 4 titles and multi-21 to the moments where the world doesn't just applaud your wins, but the way you lose? This isn't a story about debate. It's a story about growing up, about choices, about that quiet interior renovation no PR team can manufacture. We'll start at the beginning, where speed sometimes outpaced character, and reach the end of the 2010s, where character began to set the pace. And at the end, only one question remains. If Seb can rewrite his story in front of millions, what's stopping us from rewriting ours? But that wasn't the whole story. Speed before wisdom, the birth of the crash kid. The first thing the world learned about Vettel was the easiest to grasp. He was fast, not fast for a youngster, just fast, full stop. His feel for the front end was like perfect pitch. He could hear grip, sketch arcs across apexes, and squeeze the throttle with the courage of a 23-year-old who hasn't found the limit because he's too busy moving it. The second thing was less comfortable. Mistakes happened. The sharpened elbow of raw talent sometimes punctured his still fragile composure. One misjudged lunge, one uncoordinated move at high speed, one too late brake marker, and suddenly, the paddock had a nickname that felt like a brand burned into leather: Crash Kid. To some, it was a petty oversimplification, every great learned to fly by falling. To others, it was a useful warning. He's a comet. Admire it, but don't stand beneath it. Seb heard all of it. In press conferences, his eyes blinked fast, a mix of impatience and restraint. When he won, his smile popped like a cork. When he messed up, the defense mechanisms bit his lip and his tongue laced irony over vulnerability. In those small cuts, the seed of what people would call his villainy was planted. Not his speed, but his intolerance for fragility, his own and everyone else's. The world loves prodigies, but has a short fuse for public stumbles. Seb still had to learn how to fall quietly, and how to be quieter than the applause. But the rumble of 4 consecutive titles was already rolling in. The title machine, when perfection sounds like arrogance. Domination is boring if you're not the one dominating. With the right car, the right team, and a mind trimmed to symphony, victory becomes a habit. For Seb, habit looked audacious. We ticked off poles like rosary beads, caught micro-corrections through fast kinks, and wrote new lines in the record book in dry ink. Champion, 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 champion. And still, within that frame, something scratched at people. The ritual, the famous number, 1 finger to the sky. For the fans of the beaten, it was a pinch of salt on a fresh cut. For headline writers, a tidy symbol of ego. For Seb, it was boyish joy, unfiltered and real. But sport rarely reads intentions. It reads headlines. And the headlines were blunt: him again. When you win too often, human nature starts looking for someone to resent. Even if that someone is victory itself. Somewhere between the gloss of laurel wreaths and the Sunday anthem routine, static gathered under the stage. Applause shrank. Boos grew bolder. Not because of his speed, but because he seemed to leave no room for anyone else. Seb was the apex predator of his era, and like every apex, he inspired a primal urge in others to bring him down. The tone in the grandstands shifted, and on that bed of quiet discontent, a scene arrived that made the noise deafening. Then came 2013, and a radio code turned into a charge sheet. Multi-21, when orders are heavy and choices heavier. There are moments that aren't merely controversial, they're case studies. Malaysia, 2013 was one of them. Multi-21, 2 numbers, 1 hierarchy, car number. 2 stays ahead of car number. 1, balanced security, team 1-2. And then insubordination. Let's not varnish it. Seb passed Weber because he wanted to win. Because the racer in him was louder than the employee. Because somewhere in the bone marrow of a champion, an imperative hums, if you can, you must. The paddock dropped not just a debate, but a verdict. Betrayal. Ego. Disrespect. The crowd, long searching for a channel for its irritation, was handed a banner to march behind. Boos became the soundtrack. On podiums, anthems competed with the echo of disapproval. And here's what the cameras couldn't catch: the weight on his shoulders. Seb no longer wore only a helmet and expectation. He wore a label, and sometimes labels are harder than titles. Would he turn back time? Maybe. Did he regret it? Likely not at first. In those months, his armor thickened to rope bridge tension. His answers snapped with precision and sarcasm. On the surface, a villain. Beneath, someone who didn't yet know how to speak the language of his own wounds. And yet, change has a strange habit. It starts where you least expect. In a goodbye to blue, the red chapter of this story began. Seb switched teams and changed the costume of his soul. Ferrari, when a slower car teaches a fast man patience. The jump to Ferrari was more than a transfer. It was a gesture to a childhood dream. No brand in motorsport carries a heavier historical load. Cups in Maranello weigh more because they're red. And the car then wasn't the fastest. Precisely in that weakness, Seb found strength. The joy of winning when you're not the favorite. Even his first big win in red sounded different. The joy wasn't "look at me," it was "thank you." Joy like someone who knows 3 mechanics slept 2 hours. The strategist took a knife-edge call, and the engine guys squeezed impossibility from the cylinders. The crowd heard a note they hadn't heard from him in years: gratitude. Somewhere between Malaysia's pagodas and laurel crowns, a spark lit, the man beneath the helmet. Then came the darkness that united everyone. When Seb dedicated a victory to Jules Bianchi, his words weren't just sentences. They were a bridge between champion and human, between rivalry and community. Grandstands that booed yesterday fell silent to hear, "This one is for him." And yet, the road to maturity isn't a straight line. It coils, jolts, and sometimes cuts through your own shadow. Soon we'd see a temperament collide head-on with another, and how the crash left not a crumb of hate but a grain of wisdom. Between anger and apology, the fights that make you human. Good stories always have scenes where the hero drops to one knee. Seb had many. A car at the edge, fighting Hamilton for points, for breath, for psychology. At Monza and Spa, on street circuits that bite errors like a curb with teeth. The strongest scene happened far from the start-finish, under a safety car. Baku, 2017. The leader slows, you bump him, blood heats your temples, reason trails by half a second. You draw alongside, you tap wheel to wheel, a gesture of anger. Millions saw seconds that could have lit a war. They saw penalties, they saw the old Seb, the one who doesn't count to 10. But look again, the traces, not so much on the bodywork as in memory. Because his real change wasn't never get angry, it was what he did next. That's where the later Seb began, the one who would calmly say in years to come, "I wasn't right." There's the invisible seam, recognizing an error without falling apart, admitting without disarming. During these years, Vettel learned how to lose, not to a rival, but to impulse. Each small inner victory was followed by an outer one. Respect from the opponent, a normal post-race conversation, handshakes with Hamilton without acidic asides. And then, the picture that still stings. Hockenheim, 2018. Home race, wet sheen. The sweet tension of, this is your day. In a heartbeat, the car becomes infantry. It slides and stops in gravel. The radio returns a silence that hurts more than a scream. The helmet holds still 1 extra second. The world sees not a statue, a person. Paradoxically, many people liked him more at that very moment. Because what wins hearts isn't posture, It's a clean defeat that doesn't go hunting for excuses. This wasn't the end. The lesson had a final paragraph where even a champion has to swallow that someone else was better today and go on. The Canadian number. 1-inch board. The thin line between protest and parody. A season when a sign weighed more than a cup. Vettel crossed the line first in Canada, then a time penalty took the win away. He did something funny and tragic at once. He moved the number. 1-inch board in front of his own car as if reality were a set of signs you could swap. Many clapped at the rebellion, others sighed, childish. Behind the gesture was fatigue. Fatigue with the split hairs between right, wrong, the microscope on timing, the world's eternal court over who deserves what. And here, another crack opened in his armor. Seb started to talk more gently about others and more firmly about himself. Teammates felt it. He pointed a thumb at his chest. That's on me. When a younger driver flew, Seb found ways to praise rather than diminish. When a mechanic botched a stop, he squeezed a shoulder first, not because cameras were there, but because that's how you protect a team. And fans, the same ones who once booed, began to notice. Frame by frame, interview by interview, he built capital made of respect with nothing to do with finishing positions. And so, without trumpets, the villain began to fade out of the story. One more test remained. It would come not on a track, but at the negotiating table. The quiet goodbye, when class means not slamming the door. Sometimes the strongest scenes are the quietest. News that Ferrari and Vettel would part arrived without music, ribbons, or a soft thank you for everything. Seb's response? Simple, respectful, wearing that smile that was no longer armor but choice. When prodded with sharp questions, he didn't jab back. When there was room to slip in a needle, he slipped in a thank you. That season, teammates and rivals lined up behind him without slogans. One left a note, another offered a helmet swap, a third, a hug. And in the stands, even fans of teams still irritated by multi-21 lifted signs for Seb. Nothing melts reputation like dignity in an unpleasant moment. 10 years earlier, he might have met it with sparks. Now he met it with quiet generosity. That was the full circle. From a kid who won in ways that made the world angry to a man who lost in ways that made the world applaud. Sometimes victory has no champagne. That's exactly what makes it pure. And yet, this isn't just sport. It's a person waking up socially. The inner turn, jokes, notes, and causes. The hero who doesn't seek a stage. The real metamorphosis doesn't happen on the podium. It happens between races. In the late 2000s, Seb started doing small things that weighed a ton. Leaving handwritten cards for mechanics and other teams after a great stop. Returning helmets to young drivers with "proud of you" scribbled on them. Hanging back in the garage after midnight to help pack down because they're my team. Let them get home earlier. On the big stage, he spoke about the environment, publicly admitted he lived a paradox, supported equality, and wore symbols of solidarity where someone could see them and feel a little less alone. He didn't do it loudly, not with a stack of hashtags, not with a lecturing tone. He did it with the same calm confidence he once used to open the throttle, only this time for someone else. You know what changes performative truth most? Consistency. When you quietly say the same thing year after year, people start to believe that's truly you. That's how the selfish rule breaker from 2013 arrived at the decade's end as the paddock's big brother. The guy who can explain turn 3 better than telemetry. The guy whose "you've got this" weighs more than a second a lap. With that inner turn, the story actually ends. Not on a finish line, but in the locker room of character. Look back across the 2000s, 10s, and you'll see two faces of Sebastian Vettel. The first, a kid who wins everything and thinks he must be impenetrable. The second, a man who knows real strength is permeable, to admit, to show mercy, to back someone else, to say thank you. The first face won 4 titles, the second won respect. Now it's your turn. When did Seb change your mind? Was it multi-21 when you decided not to close your eyes to the cost of winning?
Sebastian Vettel, das 75. Mal Vettel.
Was it Hockenheim when you didn't see a fallen idol but a real person? Or was it some tiny gesture the cameras almost missed, but you'll never forget? Drop your moment below. Because this story isn't only about Vettel, it's about us. Viewers who have the power not to pin permanent labels, to give change a chance, to applaud not just speed, but the road that leads to it. And if tomorrow someone asks how a booed champion became the paddock's favorite, smile and say, easy, he simply took off the armor.